So everyone worked their arse off through the Industrial Revolution in the hope that one day these machines would reach the point where no one would have to work and we'd all be provided for by these machines that do the labour. That's partly what William Blake talks about in his Jerusalem, you know, when he says, through these dark satanic mills we will build Jerusalem in this green and blessed land. It's talking about Jerusalem being the second coming, the sort of heaven on earth will be built, but they'll do it through this hard work, through these satanic mills. That's industrialisation. But the industrialisation's been done. It's over. It worked. We've got the machines, we've got the microchip, we've got the computers, we've got machines that can do everything for us now. But we ain't been set free. So instead of setting people free, what they've done is just say, well, you're unemployed, you're a piece of shit, you're this, you're that and the other. But in actual fact, it's the paradigm's wrong. We've got the paradigm here of the 1920s. The 40-hour working week is that was set up by Mussolini back in the day, you know, and it was a completely different ideology then, and different paradigm, different way of thinking. Even all these, you know, these leftists and these Marxists that talk about freeing humanity, even their ideology, Marxism, is an ideology built for the industrial age, but we've passed that now. In other words, whatever side of the fence you sit on, these people are all working with out-of-date ideologies, completely out-of-date ideologies, and they haven't realised, even the people who are for the unemployed, and many of them haven't realised that we're living in a different world now. And what should have happened is that as a machine takes a man's job, then that corporation who owns that machine should have agreed to pay that man a wage for the rest of his life. And that should have been done periodically, you know, constantly, as we began to industrialise the world. But it hasn't happened like that. What's happened is you've been told that you're a worthless piece of shit, get down the job centre and get you know, some crappy piece of welfare as if it's your fault. But it's not your fault, it's just that you've been superseded, you've been made redundant. But in a way it should be a good thing, because it shows that humanity's progressed towards this utopia, but you haven't been allowed to experience the utopia. You've been told that it's your fault somehow, and of course it's total nonsense. If a machine does your job, then it's not your fault. It's not like a bad thing. It should be a good thing. But instead what's happened is these people who have control of the money, the coffers, instead of freeing people, what they've done is just hoard money. So you've got now the CEO of some corporation that now has the money that he couldn't spend in a million lifetimes, but he's got it there. And I'm not saying there's any harm in living well. These people could still live well, but they still could have moved towards freeing people. And it probably wouldn't be easy to organise so many corporations and so many different people in the world, but it hasn't even been looked at. Governments could have used their leverage if they'd begun early enough in the, you know, at the end of the Victorian period, and had said, okay, we need to look into this new world now that we're going to create. Even after the Second World War they could have done it. Churchill and all the others could have looked at it. But instead what they've done is they've allowed these corporations to hoard money, and they're holding on to a dead paradigm. They're holding on to a paradigm that shouldn't even exist now. The whole concept of work doesn't really need to exist. I mean, you can work, but if you want to work, but you should be working on things that you wish to work on now. You know, like these freed human beings. They're not going to be sat around, just smoking dope all day. Some of them might be, but what you'll find as people are freed, they'll begin to create the great artworks of the future, create the great literary works, invent better machines to do more work, to free more people, and so on. So it's not like hoping for this utopia of laziness. It's just that the idea of work is it's a human concept that should have been abolished in the way we think of work. In other words, you work in a job that you can't stand, and you get paid very little money for it, and you just sort of bumble along in life waiting for the next day that you're off work. Well, that's an outdated concept now, but none of these governments and none of these organisations will have it, because that's how they hold on to their little bit of power, So, getting back to my main point about why you actually haven't got a job. Well, industrialism's over. We've established that. Yeah, they'll still use people if they can get them to work cheaper than the machines. If they can get people to work for pennies over in China and so on, they'll get people to work there. But that's part of it as well, because technological advancement has reached the point where they can now transport these machines anywhere in the world and have people do the work there, with minimal input for cheap, and us in the West just redundant, basically. So this continued through the 80s. We had a surplus workforce. In other words, it's like musical chairs. There are now not enough jobs for people to do. It's that simple. And when the music stops, someone's not going to have a seat, right? So they came up with this concept, and this was the blip that we saw during the Blair period. Remember when there was a lot of work around in the Blair period, supposedly? All this like trash capitalist boom that we had, that was supposed to be a boom, but was it really a boom, or was it just, a boom made on the back of debt? And in those times, remember, everyone had an admin job. All the people who used to work in factories and so on, we were all doing agency work, weren't we? We were sort of, you'd sign up with an agency and they'd put you in some temping position in an office somewhere, and it was all this like clearinghouse work, data input, admin. And this was called the service sector economy, and this was what they invented to replace the industrial economy. So we had they came up with this idea that it's called marginal utility economics, where they decided that all these surplus ex-industrial workers could be put to work in a service sector industry. Now, a service sector is like, let's say you're a shopkeeper, you're a hairdresser, you work in an office, you work in a call centre answering calls, you were a checkout girl. That's a service, right? And what they do is they pay people who provide services money, wages, and then they hope that these people are then going to go and spend that money on more services to keep things going. You've got to have a lot of immigration coming in order to keep wages down, because the immigrants that come, because their societies often pay low wages when they come here, they expect low wages already, and this is how they artificially keep wages artificially low. And this service sector kind of works for a little while, but it's all leveraged on debt upon debt upon debt, and then you leverage more debt on the prospect of debt in the future, which is what all this financial collapse is. This is the chickens coming home to roost. And you sell things off, you sell as much of the public wealth off as you can. This is what all the privatisation of everything's about. You've got to raise funds somewhere. It's a clearinghouse. It's like when a company goes bust, you sell the assets, right? And the end of industrialisation is Britain's gone bust, and you're clearing it. You're clearing the house. You're selling the assets, and you're going to try and create something new by selling these assets. But of course, it's not going to work because you have this huge surplus population, a diminishing number of jobs, and then you have to bring more immigrants in all the time, which means there's less jobs for the people who are already here, and it just goes round and round in a vicious cycle. But what these politicians do is they're on 4-year terms, so they just think, well, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to keep it going, keep myself in a decent wage, buy a house abroad or something, and do my term and leave. That's what's in the mind of all these politicians. Meanwhile, you're out of work. You can't find any work. You once had a service sector job, but the service sector's gone because that's finished now. This is what we're seeing now with this financial collapse and with all this unemployment. This is the end of that short period, that service sector period, because it was all a load of nonsense to begin with. But the machines have taken over that period now. The machines do those jobs. You used to be working a call centre, right? Well, what happens now when you ring the bank? You get an automated message, a machine, a computer, and it'll say, press 1 if you would like to view your account details or something. Press 2. So a human being used to do that job, but that job's gone now. It's gone by the wayside. It's not coming back. This idea that, when the economy gets better, these jobs will come back. They won't come back because there's no need for a human being to do that job anymore. And it's the same all over the place, apart from some of the things that still can't be done by machines: healthcare, hairdressing, building, these kinds of jobs. But eventually they will go, or they'll be cut down. There'll be a lot less people working there. Look at checkout girls now, or what used to be checkout girl. A checkout girl was basically a job any woman could get, or any man increasingly. They could get it without any education. They could do the job, and they'd make an okay wage. It was never going to be a great wage, but it was a job anyone could get. But now these checkouts, they're all automated, aren't they? You go to the checkout and it's a machine, and you've got one checkout operator now that stands at the end of the row of machines and walks up and down telling people how to use them, because people don't like them and all know how to use them. But before, that used to be like 10 people had that job, but now it's just one. So we see this shaving of the human element in all industries now, even in offices like, let's say, the tax office. I know people who work in the tax office, and in the tax office now they've got a machine that does most of the work, and most of those people, it hasn't come into force yet, but it will come into force, and the system will get better and those people will get laid off. And some of these technologies aren't particularly good. The checkout things aren't very good. The phone things are annoying, but they'll get better, because think how quickly computer technology evolves. Once the ball's been set rolling, it goes at a massive rate. I mean, the internet was nothing in '98, it was utter crap, but look at it now, it's amazing. You've got videos, full streaming video, all that kind of stuff. So these technologies will get better, and more jobs will go, and that's why you're unemployed. It's because the service sector's come to an end, and they say things like, well, we're going to replace it with the green sector, building solar panels and so on. Well, if you think the green sector's going to offset the industrial revolution, you've got another thing coming. It's not going to happen. The truth is that the machines have now reached a point where humanity is becoming redundant, and is well on the way to becoming redundant. And it's time to begin freeing humanity. It's time to say that either we allow people to live on a full working wage once their job's been taken by a machine or outsourced to another country, because these companies are still making profit. It's not that these companies couldn't do that and not make a profit. It's just they wouldn't be hoarding as much wealth. Or we could do it, there'd be another way to look at it, and you could start reducing the working week but still paying the same wage. But instead, through their greed, they're using this as an excuse to lay people off. All these layoffs that are coming, you see all these people laid off, and these companies are like, well, it's the economy, that's why we're laying people off. No, it isn't. They've wanted to lay those people off for years, because those people are no longer needed because of the computers that are doing the jobs. But they've used this downturn to lay these people off, to have an excuse, and it's evil. It really is. And there's a lot of people that are sort of committing suicide over this thing and everything. It's disgusting. It really is, when you understand the real concept of what's actually happening in the world. And the people at the top are well aware of it, but they don't care. And because their problem is, we don't need these people, how can we get rid of them, how can we get the population down? A suicide to them is a good thing, really, because it's one less statistic that they have to think about. It's one less sort of population blip, really. If people can at least start thinking about this and questioning it, and not living in this backward paradigm of the idea that everyone should work. Why haven't you got a job? Well, the idea that there are jobs to be had is going. It's gone. There are no jobs. There's no need for people anymore. This is an old-fashioned idea. So I'd just suggest that if you haven't got a job, to just try and get one. Obviously try and do what you can, but don't blame yourself. Don't get in on yourself and think, oh, it's all my fault, I'm a piece of shit, I'm like worthless. Like this one girl I saw, this one article where this girl killed herself, and because she'd sent out all these application forms and couldn't get a job. Just realise that the reason you haven't got a job is because there's now a computer doing your job, and it's not your fault. There's nothing you can do about it. And just try and stay strong, and hopefully things will somehow work out. Alright, so take care.